Hello, my name is David Fye, Executive Director for the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. I asked the members of the Marriage and Family Therapy Supervision Manual Subcommittee to respond to a roll call to signify their presence at this open meeting that is being conducted remotely by conference call and other electronic medium. Nicole Eitzen.
Here.
And Marcy Lechtenberg.
Present.
And then the following BSRB staff members are in attendance as well. I am David Fye, Executive Director, and Leslie Allen.
Here.
And she is the Assistant Director and Licensing Manager for the board. Next, I'll read a message concerning the meeting being held remotely. Public comment allows the public to address the subcommittee about its concerns, but the Kansas Open Meeting Act, or KOMA, does not require the subcommittee to provide public comment or answer questions from individuals. Individuals requesting to provide public comment could contact the executive director prior to the meeting by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov. There will be no public comment at this meeting as no individuals requested to provide public comment. Because we are conducting this meeting remotely by conference call and other teleconference ability, I state for the record the following information. Public access to the meeting is being conducted by medium of interactive communication that allows members of the public without cost to attend the meeting through the use of the conference call and on the board's YouTube channel. While the meeting is conducted remotely, the requirements of KOMA are not suspended, so we will be conducting this meeting pursuant to the KOMA. On September 23rd, 2022, we sent notice of the subcommittee meeting to all individuals who had requested notice of the board or advisory committee meetings. The notice was also posted on the board's website, bsrb.ks.gov. You may obtain a copy of the notice at that website. An agenda and other meeting material are posted on the board's website and are available for review. And if you would like a copy of the agenda, you can send an email directly to me, david.fye@ks.gov, with the subject line request for the agenda, and it will be sent to you. The notice contains information on the conference call and YouTube channel that allows members of the public to attend the meeting free of charge. The notice also states that if there are any technical issues during the meeting, you may call the board office at 785-296-3240 or send an email to bsrb@ks.gov. A recording of the meeting will be available on the BSRB YouTube channel following the conclusion of the meeting by using the link to the meeting on the agenda. And the conference call line is active. I did check that before the meeting. There's no one attending on the conference call, but I'll let you guys know if I hear any beep come over on that. So welcome to the Marriage and Family Therapy Advisory Committee's subcommittee on the supervision manual. I thought I'd provide a little background as we got started with the work of the subcommittee, just to kind of remind you about your charge and let you know how we got to this point. So by statute, that is KSA 74-7501E, the board is able to provide authority for subcommittees to be formed and to work on different topics. At the Marriage and Family Therapy Advisory Committee meeting on April 8th, 2022, the advisory committee was supportive of forming a subcommittee for the creation of a supervision manual. And it was discussed that the hope would be that this manual would be helpful, similar to what exists as a supervision manual for the social work profession. And the interest was that this subcommittee would meet in the fall of 2022. At the board meeting on May 9th of 2022, the board of the BSRB approved the request for the subcommittee to be formed. And then at the Marriage and Family Therapy Advisory Committee meeting on August 12th, 2022, the members volunteered to serve on the subcommittee. So that's a little background about how the subcommittee was requested and formed. And we have set up a 1-hour meeting for today to allow you to have some discussion. This process is pretty open in terms of how we can be supportive of you in terms of going through and working on a supervision manual. I did send out some materials, including a simple agenda and also a copy of the social work supervision manual. So if you would like at some point during this time, we can go ahead and look through that manual together and then highlight some items you think would be helpful for us to have for the marriage and family therapy profession. But it can also be a time for open discussion too. If you have any preliminary thoughts on items that you'd like to make sure are included in that manual, or any other kind of conversation you have about this. So I'll go ahead and open it up and see if Marcy or Nicole, if you have any thoughts right now in terms of working on the supervision manual subcommittee.
I think some of the stuff that would be really helpful in this, and I'm trying to remember because I've read through the social worker one before. I didn't prior to today, but something that I went through when I became a supervisor is there was confusion on how to become a supervisor. So some of the steps that required. So the training, absolutely, that's very clear. Like there's some things that are very clear, but there was some confusion on the supervision of supervision. What does that mean? And how is that defined? And I think that is something different from the social workers because I don't think they have to have that. Whereas I think the MFTs do, if I'm remembering right. And so I think the way that I did it was right because I got approved. And I think I talked to you, Leslie. I think you're the one that I kind of went back and forth with email wise on that. But I think that's some clarification that could be really helpful to have in a manual. And yeah, what that looks like.
Yes, I agree with that. So also a distinction between what the Kansas requirements are, those different from the AMFT requirements. So just being an AMFT approved supervisor, is that a part of it? Do we require that as well? So I think there is that confusion piece is something that we've struggled with on our end too.
And Leslie, Allen, I know we didn't talk about this ahead of time, so I apologize for that. But do you have any comments that maybe you've heard from individuals who have served as supervisors that you think might be helpful for us to talk about in terms of this group too? Maybe for the marriage and family therapy profession, but in terms of supervision, any items you've heard that you think might be helpful to have included in the manual?
Not really. I could ask Joan. Obviously, she's not here, but she would have more of that information with her because she talks to most of the people. There are some things that I think maybe need to be, people think that for example, people think that the one hour supervision to 15 hours of direct client contact is kind of optional, that that's a loose guide, and it's not. So people are doing like 30 hours of direct client contact and haven't had any supervision. And so I think that maybe something like that, things like that maybe would be helpful in the manual. They're still related to our regulations and statutes, so it shouldn't be a problem to have it in the guide. But that is a problem that I know when we get logs that we've had a lot of.
Okay, thank you. And I think probably for the next time that the subcommittee meets, we'll ask Joan to attend the meeting as well, and she can share some other comments.
That would be good. Joan is a wealth of information.
And yeah, Joan Hahn is a member of our licensing staff who helps out with all of the clinical levels for individuals seeking clinical level licensure, and does a lot of work with supervision of individuals. And so, well, how about this? How about if I go ahead and I'll share my screen and I will pull up, we don't have to follow the same guide, but the supervision manual for the social work profession was referenced when this subcommittee was created. And while of course we're not tied to any of those things, it may be helpful to kind of look through that together and then just sort of have a conversation as we go. If there's any items that stand out to you that you think we need to make sure that we have in a supervision manual for the marriage and family therapy profession, or maybe if there's things that you think might be a little bit different. So how about if we walk through that together, and we'll spend a little bit of today reviewing the manual, and feel free to say any comments. Since my screen will be shared, I don't know that I'll have the ability to see if you have a hand raised. So yeah, just feel to comment if you see something in the manual that you want to comment on.
One thing I would, I guess is important to remember, because we had legal review this manual. We had a lot of other information in the manual initially, and when legal reviewed it, we had to cut it way down. Because it's coming from the board, it has to be based on statutes and regulations. So we can't bring in information from like AAMFT or anything like that. We have to stick to our requirements and our statutes and regulations.
And this might be helpful to also reference to, because sometimes that issue does get some questions about if we can, tie to an association. And so one thing we've been advised to do is, if there's wording choices that we think would be helpful to use either in our statutes or our regulation, the wording can be helpful to bring over. But if you were to say, we want to link to the word, like Leslie Allen just said, to a certain association, should that association change its position to something the board may not agree to, the board could be potentially bound by statutes or regulations to the actions of a group it has no control over. And so I think that's one of the reasons why they've said, go ahead and include separate language, and you can take that language from other groups. It's just, that's kind of the fine line between linking to what their existing policies or procedures are versus using some of the same text that they have endorsed.
And I think some of that language, if I'm remembering right, is on the application to be a supervisor. It's not saying the BSRB was endorsing it. It's just asking a question if you're a part of the double AMFT, and that those requirements, like there are some extra things you have to do, because that is, I do remember it being on there, but it's not, I didn't feel like it was endorsing anything either.
Right.
I wonder if, kind of like what Marcy's saying, it's just a reminder to individuals, if you are interested in being a double AMFT supervisor, you need to look at those regulations. This is for the state of Kansas, but there may be additional things as a part of double AMFT that you need to be aware of. I don't know if we can include that kind of language or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We'd have to check.
Okay. I'm sharing my screen now, and I've pulled up a copy of the supervision manual that was put out for the social work profession. Can you all see that on your screen as well? Okay, great. So this was produced by the BSRB, and the manual starts with just some information about who we are and our mission, as well as our location. And it notes this is the supervision manual for the social work profession, the clinical level of social work. There's a table of contents that does note that the supervision manual was created by the subcommittee. It came out in, it was the product of the subcommittee work, which met for about a year, from January 23rd of 2019 to February of 2022, or 2020. And then there's some items on here: the supervision manual purpose, some acknowledgements, clinical supervision, and licensure statutes and regulations, Lscsw supervision process and forms. And then it goes through a little bit of the definitions of the clinical supervisor, the role of the Lscsw clinical supervisor, definition of Lscsw clinical practice, legal responsibilities and liability risk for Lscsw clinical supervision, Lscsw clinical supervision training plans, clinical supervision hour summary, training plan amendments, new additional supervisor work, and then the Lscsw application. It also covers some common questions that have been asked and provides answers, and provides a section on how to write a clinical supervision training plan. And then there are some sample forms, including supervision logs, supervision meeting forms as well. There's a section that describes the purpose of the manual, and has a little section here that links to the BSRB website for more information as well. I think that is important. We do tend to try to provide as much information as we can on the website as resources for individuals. The next section was an acknowledgement section, and the board wanted to thank individuals who had assisted with the work in putting together the supervision manual, including some of the members that served on the board for the social work profession, individuals who served on the subcommittee, and then some of the staff here at the BSRB office. And then there were some direct links, and this had to do with links to the clinical supervision and licensure requirements, statutes and regulations. And just as a reminder, when we reference statutes, those are items that are passed in bills and become law, and they can't be changed unless another law
Yeah, I'm in a
occurs.
meeting. Can I call you back?
And Leslie, I'll go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you. So the statutes are in law, and statutes cannot be changed unless another bill occurs that would change the statutes. Regulations, on the other hand, the board is able to discuss potential changes to regulations. And then if there is a determination by the board to change the regulatory language, the board has authority to go ahead and offer changes to that. The regulations have to, they can't go above the authority that the statutes provide. So that's kind of the interplay between the statutes and the regulations. Both serve an important function, but it's important to know the difference between the two.
And these, we just tried to include all of the all the things we could think of that pertain to the application, supervision, definitions, and these statutes and regs are found throughout the manual as well, but this was just a central location for all of the links.
The next section talks about the Lscsw supervision process and forms, licensure statutes and regulations, and it kind of walks through the definition of Lscsw clinical supervision. There's also a statute that speaks to the role of the Lscsw clinical supervisor under KSA 65-6319.
And the MFT statutes and regulations are set up a little different. Where social work has 2 regulations and a different statute for diagnosis and treatment. MFT, their things are found in 1 regulation for supervision, and the definitions is where you'll find the authorization to diagnose and treat. So it'll have a little bit different setup.
And there are some definitions about clinical social work practice. For the social work profession, the definition of clinical social work practice is found in KAR 102-2-1A little e.
That's an error too, I just found.
Okay.
There's no big A.
So there's a definition of social work practice there in statute. A definition of the term psychotherapy, also found in statute.
And MFT does not have a psychotherapy definition.
There was some language on legal responsibilities and liability risk for Lscsw clinical supervision. It was noted that this is a partial list. And while we did want to help provide information, we did recommend individuals should check with their professional liability insurance to make sure that they are covered. And that has to do with a little bit of the difference in terms of our jurisdiction versus the jurisdiction of other entities. There is some language that talks about KSA 65-6311, some of the different grounds for suspension, limitation, or other conditions of licensure, or also some disciplinary remedies that could be imposed for certain reasons in statute.
At the bottom of this box, there is a link. We're at the bottom of this section. There's a link to the unprofessional conduct regulation. And the reason that we posted the statute and not the regulation is because of the length of the regulation. But if you wanted it included, we could do that.
And we should reference too that today is October 4th of 2022. This year, one of the major undertakings of the board and all of the advisory committees for the board has been to do a comprehensive review of the unprofessional conduct regulations for the board. So the goal was by the end of this year to have a list of potential items that could be submitted to the board for possible changes. And so it is likely that there will be some changes to the unprofessional conduct regulations, at least submitted sometime next year after the board has a chance to review those and to provide further comment and possibly to look to see, can there be consistency between some of those recommended changes. So the unprofessional conduct regulations may be in the process of being changed, but I would imagine the general numbering for the regulations probably would not change a great deal. There's a section that talks about the Lscsw clinical supervision training plan. There is a statute that defines clinical supervision training plan. And then there is a link to clinical supervision training plan form. It is also referenced an example template on how to write a clinical supervision plan, and also a sample supervision log and supervision meeting form. There's another section that details clinical supervision hour summary and the definitions relating to clinical supervision hours. The regulations are highlighted there, and some additional information concerning the minimum requirements of how many hours need to be met, and client contact versus indirect client contact.
With our excuse me, with our new regulations that have a hearing in November. So hopefully they'll be official by the late November, early December. There is now a definition for direct client contact that we could put in here that is more, it's a little bit more descriptive.
I think that is great. That was one of the other things I was thinking about as we were going through that having those definitions will be really helpful for people.
I agree.
The next section details training plan amendments. And it references statutes or regulations that refer to the requirements as far as submitting some of those training plan amendments. The next section of the document talks about Lscsw application process. And there is a link to the application for licensure as it's referenced in KAR 102-2-2A, and then also a link to the actual application packet, including instructions and supervisor's attestation. On our website, we do try to provide helpful information in the form of frequently asked questions or FAQs. So there was a section here in the manual that dealt with common questions asked and answered, and there was a direct link to the website.
There's also, there is a section for MFT FAQs. That might be something that you guys look at and see if there are things that you feel would be helpful that we could add to that FAQ list.
There's a section that talks to writing a clinical supervision training plan. There's also some language that indicates the DSM-4 or 5. which one should be used in diagnosing clients. Some of the questions that are part of this process are anticipating the types of clients you'll be providing services to. What services will you be providing to clients? Some of the dates that are expected to be covered in the supervision training plan. It kind of walks through a lot of the questions you should be asking when you're creating one of these.
It is actually the questions from the training plan form. So yeah, you need to, or they need to be familiar with these things. And Joan did this because people would call and ask her, well, what, I don't know, do you have a template? And we can't provide a template and give the answers, but she tried to explain it exactly what they should be listing here.
So having gone through this process to become a supervisor, is this the type of information you think would be helpful as you would be going through the form and looking to see, how should I understand the questions and what would help me provide the right information, or do you think this kind of information would be helpful for a supervision manual for the marriage and family therapy profession?
Yes, I think this would be very helpful.
And the the sample forms are samples. They are not required. People can make their own supervision log. It was just, these are the things that we look for when we see logs. So this kind of information, to make it easier, should be included. And that's a really detailed supervision form. And part of that is, unfortunately, sometimes a supervisor will pass away during the process of supervision. They can't sign forms. So if we have more information that we know the supervision was going well and they were, not having issues, that we might be able to use the hours they have accrued towards still use those hours toward meeting the requirements for licensure.
Okay, so we kind of walked through that form together, just highlighting the different sections and explaining a little bit some of the thought process that went into the creation of the form for social work. The manual for the social work profession is about 15 pages. So it's not a super lengthy form or a super lengthy document. Now, part of that is because it has a lot of references to other materials such as the statutes and regulations. But what do you think in terms of the overall length of the document? Do you think something that would be about that big would be helpful, or do you think it would need to be something a little bit different than that?
I think that seems appropriate. It didn't seem like it had more information than what they would need, and it brings people back to the statutes and regulations, but also I like the Q&A or just some of those, kind of commonly asked questions on there.
Yeah, I like the links. If people need more information, they can. And this is just a question I have. Is this Would we also include a section on how to become an approved Kansas approved supervisor, or is that totally a different?
We could put that in there somewhere. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that would be helpful, because
Mm-hmm.
if I was on a website trying to find out the information to do that, I would probably go to this document to find that information.
Okay. Would you want that in the very beginning before the clinical supervision information? Or at the end, or?
I don't know where that would fit in
Okay.
best. I think if it's in the table of contents
Mm-hmm.
and they could look at that, then they would
Okay.
know where to go.
I think it could be helpful to have it towards the beginning, but I mean, I like the order of things that they have here on theirs, like having the statutes and regulations.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wonder if after that it could be helpful
To put it in there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on maybe some goals or some other items we haven't talked about that either you'd like to see achieved in terms of creating a manual, or anything else maybe we haven't already talked about today, and just that we want to make sure we get down to either look into between now and the next time the subcommittee meets, or anything like that?
I was trying to find my notes. I did my training. I think it was in July, maybe it was June. I can't remember, when I went through the supervision training that I needed to get this. And I feel like there were some questions I wrote down from that. But now I should have pulled them up before, and I thought they were going to be easier to find than what I have. So that is no help right now, but.
Well, and if you, so late last year in December of 2021, the Social Work Advisory Committee requested a survey be sent out to social workers. And several of the questions on that survey dealt with supervision. So if you don't have any other notes today, it may be helpful between now and then to check out the copy of that report. It is posted on the BSRB website under the materials, I believe, from that February meeting. And so we took the results from that survey and we put together about a 25-page report, if I remember correctly. And not all the questions did deal with supervision, but the majority of them did. And so there may be some comments that you see. I know it's a different profession, but there may be some common themes in terms of some of that feedback we got. So if you have time, go ahead and take a look at some of those responses in the report and see if maybe there might be some items that we could comment on. Before we produce the final version of the report, like we did with the social work manual, we'll have to have legal counsel review it to make sure that we're able to release any kind of information, or if there's guidance we want to provide, we got to make sure that we're the right authority to be putting that out there. But go ahead and take a look at that report and see if there's any more comments that kind of come up based on that review. And I think if it works for all of you, I think maybe what we will plan to do is just have another 1-hour meeting here in a couple months. And then we'll try to find a time that works for both of you and also Jardine. And then we can kind of go through a little bit, and we'll have Joan attend the next meeting, and she can maybe share some of her thoughts as well. And then we can kind of collect more information and start to look through maybe how some of these ideas and the format would apply to the marriage and family therapy profession. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay. Any other comments before we wrap up the meeting today? No? Well, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate both of you serving on this subcommittee for the advisory committee. If you do have any questions in between now and then, feel free to reach out to me or Leslie, and we're happy to look into some additional material. But thanks again for your time on this, and we will meet again here in a couple months and take the next step forward with the manual creation.
Sorry, David, I do have a question. Sorry, just thought about it. Are we, do we have the liberty to ask like some of our fellow MFTs that have maybe either been through this process or maybe haven't, and they've got questions that they feel are unclear? Can we seek their feedback out for this, or what? I guess I don't know how close-lipped we need to be with this.
Sure. So the subcommittee is an official committee underneath the board. In terms of subcommittee members working together, you're not really able to work together outside of a meeting, but you can definitely talk to individuals that are other licensees and collect feedback from them to bring back to a future meeting. And these meetings are being broadcast, so it is understood, and there's also some information in the minutes that you both had volunteered to serve on this, so that's all public. So yeah, if you want to talk to anybody and say that you're working on this subcommittee and you want to collect information, or you're trying to figure out what information might be helpful to include in the manual, I think that would be a good idea too. So yeah, that would be great.
As soon as I asked that question, I was like, well, anybody can watch this, so this isn't, yeah, like it's not a secret or anything. So okay, sorry, I'm learning the ins and outs of.
That's okay. There's some unique rules, as far as an open meeting. So we always publish notice and make sure that that's out there, and the meetings are broadcast and they're going to be available to be viewed in the future. They're archived on the YouTube channel. Just there's a few rules that we always have to watch, and that is that, we can't have communications with all the members having discussions outside of an open meeting. So a lot of the work that you're doing together has to be done in an open meeting. And so you want to make sure that you're not working together outside of the meeting when it involves the majority of the members of the committee. Now, usually when you have a larger committee, if you have a membership of like 13, you would need to have 7 individuals before you reach that threshold. But having a subcommittee this small, it is kind of limiting. So just go ahead and collect some outside information. Feel free to bring it back, and then we can work on that stuff together at the next meeting.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.